Breaking news. This is your World War III Day X update. I'm coming to you from a very degraded makeshift studio setup. This is impromptu. You're just going to have to deal with it. It's not permanent. I wanted to show you the screen today, so we had to do this. Now, right now, we have a massive exodus from the southern part of Lebanon. In the last 24 hours, we're seeing the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people moving towards the north. This number is likely going to swell into the millions in the coming weeks to come as the Arc of Fire expands deeper into Israel and deeper into Lebanon. The ultimate objective here of the Netanyahu government, who until recently was holed up in their bunker, not because of a war that was being waged, but because of the hundreds of thousands of Israeli protesters in the streets. Well, now all those protesters find themselves conveniently for Netanyahu inside a bunker and under a pseudo low intensity state of martial law, which is only going to intensify. Israel is now in a state of emergency. There's a lot of censorship. There's a media blackout, so we're never really going to know what is happening there. If you are familiar with how the Ukrainian conflict is being reported, well, get used to that now taking place in Israel and get used to only hearing good news and no bad news. The fog of war is about to get incredibly thick. The censorship right now is through the frickin' roof. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. Understand what is happening here. Iran, Russia, China are all getting a little bit too powerful, and the West thinks they need to be put in their place. Now, I'm not speaking to this from a place of preference. This is just the reality. This is called Thucydides's trap. If you know that your adversary is getting too powerful, you got to try to cut them down to size before they can get there. This is a pruning. What they're trying to do is to, through Hamas, through Hezbollah, through Yemen, eventually get to Iran. If you can get to Iran, you can get to Russia. If you can get to Russia, you can get to China. That is the ultimate end boss. Now, we need to talk about a message that I received from a subscriber who is in Russia. You guys know, all you NAFO OSCENT sleuths understand that I have Russian handlers. Well, my Russian handler sent me this, okay? Apparently now, on the backs of their utility bills in certain Russian oblasts, I'm presuming this is not all Russian oblasts, but the ones most proximate to the conflict zone, most proximate to Ukraine, that is, they are now receiving on the backs of their utility bills emergency instructions on what to do in case of a nuclear event. Okay, so imagine you get your water bill or your power bill, and on the back of it are written instructions, because they know this is how you can essentially get the message out to every single person, right? Not everybody is going to pay attention to the TV or listen to the radio, but everybody probably has a power bill. Now, I've taken the liberty of transcribing this using a photo translator. And so it's not a perfect one-to-one translation because the images they sent me were kind of grainy, but we'll do our best to try to interpret what's being said here. So on the back of what appears to be a water bill, it says the following: the civil defense signal, attention everyone, accompanied by the inclusion of sirens and loudspeakers, followed by emergency information, warns the population about the immediate danger of the need to take action. And we got to talk about 4 members of Congress who are now proposing a contingency plan of what to do in such case of a mass casualty event, not just of the civilian population, but of the entirety of Congress. Okay, we're talking about next level continuity of government. Sorry to mix and mince. We're going to get back to that. We'll talk about that later. The procedure for the actions of the population on the signal, attention to all. So here's the instructions that they are providing their population. Somewhat similar to the NYC public service announcement that we heard 2 years ago, but slightly different, a little bit more enhanced. Turn on the TV, radio, and other available sources of information. Listen, read the message about the current situation and the procedure for action. Use information received only from official sources. Bring the received information to relatives and neighbors. They may have not heard the signal. Turn off the lights. cover the gas well, act in accordance with the received message. Now, in such case that there is a radioactive emergency, close the windows, doors, and seal them with improvised means. Seal the ventilation, wear personal protective equipment, stay indoors, turn on the TV, and do not turn it off until you receive information about the shooting and the procedure for further actions. So they're kind of conflating. I think that the term shooting is something was wrong in the translation there. When receiving information about the lights out, ventilate the room, be ready for a possible repetition of civil defense signal. Attention, everyone. The Russians are deadly serious about nuclear preparedness. They're teaching it in school. They had an unprecedented nationwide nuclear drill just in the past year. They're now bringing it back into their high school curriculums. Every year they do tests of their emergency nuclear sirens and their equivalent of the emergency action messages or emergency broadcast system, I should say. So this is deadly serious in light of recent developments currently this week in New York City. A lot of big things are going to come out of this week. Some of them we're not going to know about. Some of these are going to be covert decisions that are going to dictate the fate of humanity. And this is why the Russians right now are so obsessed with nuclear rhetoric about every single thing, because they understand that there is a very high possibility that this thing is going to go nuclear if we continue on the current trajectory. Multiple warehouses full of weaponry have been essentially completely eviscerated in the last few days, and it continues on an ongoing basis. In fact, the Daily Mail came out with an interesting headline. Now, this is a false headline, incredibly misleading. They show a picture of a Russian ammunition depot being detonated. Then they talk about a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. And then they talk about striking Putin's Satan II nuclear missile, prompting a huge explosion. Now, interestingly, all of these things are true. As I reported yesterday, there was supposedly a failed test of the Sarmat missile system. It could have been sabotage. In fact, it could have even have been a Ukrainian drone. You think we would all be getting a 1,000,000-degree suntan if that were true, because of course that would be a direct existential threat to the Russian statehood if in fact Ukraine was targeting their nuclear triad. And nothing says targeting nuclear triad like targeting your most modern nuclear deployment system. But they're conflating three different stories here, and I'm pretty sure they've changed this. I made a post about this online, and I think within a half an hour they changed the title. I'm not saying I was the reason. There's probably a lot of people who are reporting it. But they're conflating three different things. Now, could there be some truth to all of this? Could there, in fact, have been an attack on a Russian Sarmat missile with the intent to try to provoke the Russians into doing something crazy? Because understand, guys, from here until the election, there is a competition between Vladimir Zelensky and Benjamin Netanyahu to try to create the biggest provocation in order to trigger a response from the other side that will then be used as justification for their cause. So yes, that's the situation that we're in. We have two people who have very powerful lobby groups surrounding them, arguably equally powerful in some respects. The only reason why the Ukrainians' hands are tied is because they understand that if Ukraine does fall to the Russians, there's a lot of secrets that are going to be given up. And so this is why they're reluctant to give some of their best tech to whatever Ukrainian government is in there, because you just never know. Sides can change, and you might have some turncoats in there. But there is a competition for whether we go the jingoistic imperialist route in the Middle East and continue to play on easy mode like Israel is doing right now with these airstrikes. They love to do that. Don't like to do ground operations, though, so I can't see them trying that for some time. But they will continue with these shock and awe type approaches in the southern part of Lebanon in order to trigger Hezbollah to overreact. Hezbollah is seemingly getting decimated. If you're only listening to the Western Israeli news, you'd be thinking to yourself, I mean, it's over. but it's far from over. Okay, it's far from over. The reason why the Houthis in Iran haven't responded yet, I have no idea. If I'm in Lebanon, I'm feeling totally abandoned right now by the axis of resistance. But maybe they have a plan. Maybe they are attempting to wait for the election because they think that a Kamala Harris government is going to be any better for Iran, which understand that every single bit of escalation that we've had up until this point has happened on Joe Biden's watch. So, and I say that in air quotes because we all know he ain't in charge right now, right? As I said, the USA and the UK are harboring plans to covertly allow Ukraine to strike deep into Russia. And it's a secret, but it's kind of an open secret, which is why you are starting to get all of the threats coming from Russia and ramping up the nuclear rhetoric. For example, Interfax has reported that Sergei Ryabkov, who is the ambassador to Russia, has messaged on a post on Telegram. He said the following: the infrastructure at the test site on Novaya Zemlya has been put on a high state of alert. This is very far in the Arctic where they used to do all the nuclear tests. We know from satellite imagery that there's a lot of activity at this place that wasn't there just a few years ago. However, the same can be said for test sites in Nevada as well as places in China. So there was an article done up about this about 6 months ago that shows all of these countries are getting ready to restart nuclear weapons testing. The United States, I believe, was the first to cross that red line, I'm guessing 8 or 9 months ago. I'm losing track of time here. They did an underground what did they call it? It didn't involve a detonation, but it was a nuclear test of some sort nonetheless. And the Russians have said that they view that as a violation of the test ban treaty. The infrastructure at the test site in Novaya Zemlya has been put on a high state of alert. This is a reaction to the actions of the West. However, Russia's position on nuclear tests is unchanged. So they always try to sandwich it and de-escalate, but then they escalate at the end. They will not be carried out if Western countries do not take such steps. Ryabkov's message on Telegram is a warning to Washington and London not to allow Ukrainian forces to launch their supplied cruise missiles on Russian military targets, because of course the Russians have to presume that not only is this going to continue to be trying to feel out Russia's radars and their missile defense, which of course could be data that could be eventually used to do a first nuclear decapitation strike against Russia, much like what they're seeing right now in Lebanon. And I'm sure when they're looking at that, they're thinking to themselves, I wonder if the West is planning like something like that for us. So they have to presume that that's what's happening. But not only that, these cruise missiles could, of course, be modified to carry nuclear weapons. So they have to presume that if there's 20 of them inbound, maybe, just maybe, they are, which is not to say that they won't be shot down, but this is the thinking. Now, Zelensky is demanding that NATO admit him into Article 5 or some security guarantee equivalent. Zelensky has leverage. People don't like to think so, but he does. He has a lot of leverage, and there's a reason why we've given them way more money in the last 2 years than we've given Israel probably in the last 10, okay? They have a shitload of leverage. And a lot of it has to do with their sheer manpower, with their, of course, what Lindsey Graham talks about in terms of the resource wealth of the region, which is kind of just the cherry on top. Ultimately, the goal is to keep Russia and China down. It is a globalist agenda which seeks to maintain Western hegemony throughout the region. That's ultimately what this is all about. And Ukraine is the battering ram. So if Zelensky says, hey, I'm going to start negotiating with the Russians, if you don't give me what I want, you're going to see people jump, and they're going to provide him with the weapons. So a lot of people think Zelensky is just this guy who's begging. And really, Zelensky's not the one, running this show. If you think a former comedian is the one who's running the show, that's not how it's working at all. It's the guys who are around him. In fact, I think it's probably Umerov who's really running the show. But anyways, so they want provisions of weapons from the West. They want new security guarantees, as I indicated. And they also want a guarantee from Biden that will not be subject to Trump's influence in the future if Trump wins the election. This, of course, is being done to prevent Ukraine from being forced into an unfavorable peace agreement, which will just backfire anyways. Because if you enter into a peace agreement right now with Russia, Russia gets incredibly more powerful on the global stage, and it's going to happen very, very fast. And the money movers understand this, and that's going to affect the global reserve currency, and it's just going to throw everything for a loop, and it's not going to be good from a Western point of view. Now, quickly, what else should we talk about here? So just a quick breakdown again on this state of emergency that we're seeing inside Israel, or inside Lebanon, I should say. Not much of a state of emergency in Israel, although we would never know because it's now illegal to post things on social media. It's probably soon going to be a very similar type of lockdown, only this time it's of the militaristic sort. And Netanyahu is getting ready to do something crazy. I think I forgot some of my notes about the story about, we got to talk about that. Is that on the printer there? Let me just see. I can't seem to find that one. Anyways, there's a story about, what is it? It is, oh yes, the mass casualty event prep. We'll get to Israel in just a sec. This is weird. Very, very strange, considering we've heard the Secret Service guy who works for Trump talk all about how, they're preparing for if there's a geopolitical event and somebody gets taken out. And then you got the satellite phone issues that were given by the satellite phones that were given to the senators. That's almost 2 years ago now. It's incredible how time flies. But all of these things are starting to stack, and they all point towards they're expecting something big to go down soon. A bipartisan group of 4 House members is advocating for a constitutional amendment allowing for the quick replacement of Congress members in the event of a mass casualty event. That's going to raise some eyebrows, considering, we're possibly on the brink of a civil, I don't want to say a civil war, but civil unrest, right? So if there is some kind of crazy radical who tries to take out a bunch of Congress members at once, is that what they're trying to prepare for here? They put forth a proposal to ensure that Congress can continue its work if a large number of members are killed in a mass attack. The proposal aims to ensure continuous representation and prevent violence from shifting political power. We've seen a 300% increase in threats against members over the last 7 years, noted Republican Derek Kilmer. The amendment will require House members to provide a list of potential replacements to their state's governor. Filling vacancies quickly would help maintain stability and deter political violence. However, passing such an amendment is challenging due to the need for 2/3 congressional vote and state ratification. Well, honestly, I don't know why you wouldn't agree to something like that, especially in times like these. Why wouldn't you? This is just another contingency continuity of government plan. This is prudent planning. Makes sense to me, unless for some reason you don't want people to be replaced and you want to handpick them by an authoritarian dictator, which would be perfectly in line with what we're seeing in Ukraine and, let's face it, Israel as well. Richard Primus, a constitutional law professor at the University of Michigan, suggested lawmakers should also consider changing the Presidential Succession Act, which includes the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the state Senate in the line of succession. So they're preparing for alterations to continuity of government. I don't know how far it's going to make it. I guess we'll see. As I indicated, or maybe I did not, I don't even remember what I've said in this video so far. The 101st Airborne is en route. They're sending the U.S. military, ground forces. Some are in Cyprus, some are already in, I believe it's Negev Air Force Base in Israel. So they're getting ready for something. There is some speculation that what Lebanon might do might amount to some sort of incursion into one of these northern border villages, and they'll see some sort of replay of Oct 7th. But I'm not so sure because, of course, you don't have the human shield element anymore because most of those people have been evacuated from that region, which is the pretext for this war in the first place, according to Netanyahu. So I don't think that that's going to happen, but this is the one place where they can get somewhat of a level playing field, because according to the Israelis, if you believe them, they're claiming that they've completely depleted destroyed half of the weapons stocks, the short and long range weapons of Hezbollah. I don't see why Hezbollah would feel the need to keep these longer range weapons so close in the southern part of the country where the heavy bombardment is currently happening. You'd think that they would keep those tucked away, but this is according to Israel now, so take it with a grain of salt. But they're suspecting that they're going to do this cross-border incursion, and then you're going to have the Americans there. So if you can have these American soldiers in these sensitive regions, and then you have a few American casualties, well, that's your tripwire. That's your green light, your blank check to start to get more American troops into that region. And make no mistake, Netanyahu will continue to expand this conflict. Whenever there is going to be a cooling down or a detente, you know the people are going to come out of their bunkers in Israel and they're going to start protesting about the hostages again, who for all we know may not even exist anymore, because there's rumors that Sinwar is dead in the Gaza Strip. So unconfirmed, but this is just another thing floated by Israel, but they need him alive. Okay, understand, it's just like bin Laden. They never wanted to kill that guy right away. You want to keep these guys alive as long as possible, because that's your meal ticket, right? When you're a dictator. Now, if you want to know what Netanyahu is going to do, and this is just another example of the snake eating its tail. You guys heard of the Ouroboros? I believe it's one of the symbols of, is it Freemasonry? I can't remember. But it's not a good thing, even though they claim it is. There's an old saying by Aristotle, evil destroys even itself. Evil will destroy even itself. So right now, Netanyahu and our acquaintance of the channel, Rafi Farber, we have some disagreements about the Israel-Palestine thing, but we can agree on one thing, and that is the manipulation of the monetary system. And he originally posted about this, that Netanyahu is getting ready to get this, phase out precious metals under the guise and under the pretext of protecting you from terrorists, okay? Because they're using it in the black market. So they want to get rid of cash and precious metals, because that is what these terrorist groups are using to do whatever terrorists do. Terrorists, right? Big air quotes on that. Who's the terrorist? Right now, most of the world is leaning in the other direction, but we're not going to get into that today. I mean, some of the things that have been happening lately, it's pretty obvious to anybody with any moral integrity as to what's really going on here, but I'll leave you to be the judge. Netanyahu to phase out precious metals. First, they're going to start with a 200 shekel note. In order to combat terrorism, all transactions will be done through debit or credit. And I'm sure Netanyahu will allow people to use Bitcoin as well, as his buddy Trump loves as well. They want to control everything under the guise of keeping people safe. The plan includes additional measures, expanded reporting obligations for citizens with income to tax authorities, launching a joint enforcement program, so just more and more bureaucracy, taking more of your rights away, using AI to identify tax evaders, increasing oversight of non-bank financial entities, including currency exchange providers, which handle substantial amounts of black market money. And of course, they put this last. If they were smart and they knew psychology, they would sandwich it in the middle, because that's what people tend to forget. They forget the middle, they remember the end. But they decided to put it at the end, banning the holding of large amounts of cash alternatives such as gold, silver, metals, and coins. Wow. They're going to ban stuff to keep us safe. Never heard of that before, eh? In terms of censorship, what's going on right now is insane. There's just a huge list of people that have gone dark. Okay, I don't even want to, I'm going to do a dedicated video on it. More have gone dark today. We're talking about news agencies. Groups that have been, for the most part, reporting. They might say something like, this guy's a martyr or whatever, because he, died defending his cause. And it's that language that gets them flagged and blacklisted. So, but it's not only that. There's a lot of other very sneaky stuff going on. If you ask me, if you're winning like you say you are, and if you have the moral high ground like you say you do, then you shouldn't need to censor anybody, because it should be self-evident. But apparently people aren't so confident. Telegram will now share users' IP addresses and phone numbers to the government when legally required. That guy sung like a canary, didn't he? Founder and CEO Pavel Durov was arrested in France last month, and then they let him go, and suddenly he's complying with the authorities. You remember what happened at Twitter? Or remember what happened when they all went after Elon, and all of a sudden he did that publicity stunt where he had to go and subject himself to Netanyahu and Ben Shapiro and friends. And since that time, the guy hasn't said a peep about what is going on in Gaza, except, oh, I'll give you free Starlink service if you need it. A number of channels have been banned from YouTube, and I'm not going to get into which channels, but they're very big players in the space in terms of the alternative media, and they're getting banned left and right. Israel is now claiming, and they have all these fancy, and this is the thing, they have all these fancy like 3D diagrams that would have taken probably, even with a good editor, they at least would have taken a few days to create these things. So they've had these animations waiting to go to use as a justification to start bombing the shit out of civilians. Could you imagine if Russia took out 475 civilians in a day? Could you imagine that? That would be all over the news. That would be Zelensky's meal ticket for another 5 years. You're not hearing that. Okay, because all they're fighting is mostly on the front lines or on actual military targets, right? You're not seeing the shit. So this is the double standard that is so obvious to anybody with half a brain. If 20 civilians are killed by Russians and then it's a terrorist act, it's genocide, it's this, it's that. But if thousands and thousands happens in Gaza or Lebanon, it's a debate as to what it is. So guys, just understand that evil ultimately destroys itself, okay? Just remember that. When they're all done there, who are they going to come after? Who are they going to come after? I can't even talk tonight. That's because I was thinking of Netanyahu. Who are they going to come after? Netanyahu is coming after you for your precious metals. Israel currently has around 13,000 Hezbollah targets. They've targeted 1,600 today. I'm presuming that their Air Force is exhausted, and you got to retool those planes. So Hezbollah has yet to really do much of anything, but we don't really know. The video that I've seen, maybe a few little drone hits, some cars on fire, same shit we've seen in Ukraine. We don't know what they're really doing. But I'll tell you, there was that incident that happened, about a month ago, where Israel said that we shot down everything Hezbollah had. But then there was a leaked video of their airbase getting hit by like multiple rockets. Small, but these were precision strikes. So you really have to wonder what we're not being shown. Because again, it's illegal, right? And everybody's getting banned. Unless you walk this razor's edge where you don't say the wrong words. And I'm telling you right now, if you are watching channels and they are getting north of like 400,000 views per video, it's likely that's a narrative that they're trying to sell you on. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people like me around who are trying to tell it like it is. I'm not trying to necessarily take sides. It's pretty evident if you're a human being with any sort of compassion whatsoever, who is in the wrong in most of these situations. If you really look at the socio-historical progression and you look at the stats and the civilian casualty, it's pretty obvious what's going on, who's provoking who. But again, can't say that. No, it's good guys and bad guys. Everything's black and white. Anyways, they got 13,000 targets. Hezbollah was well aware of Israel's target list, and they've likely moved a lot of their weapon systems away from these positions. They have an extensive subterranean network. They've yet to start using their big guns. I don't know why at this point in time, because quite frankly, their entire command structure has been eviscerated. We don't even know if Nasrallah is still alive. You know, say what you want about the Israelis, but they're, you know, if we're just in the first inning of this thing, they are winning like 10-0, if not 20-0. So Hezbollah's got a lot of catching up to do, but I expect that they're going to try to make it back when the ground invasion inevitably begins. Hezbollah has more assets on the Syrian border than in Lebanon, and this is from somebody who's from a pro-Lebanese standpoint, a pro-Hezbollah standpoint. So it's important to have this point of view to just counterbalance, so we can kind of understand that the truth is somewhere in the middle. Hezbollah has more assets on the Syrian border than in Lebanon, along with underground cities containing rockets in the south and the Bekaa. The victory that Netanyahu and Gallant will claim is false. How can we be sure? Look at the sheer number of rockets and missiles expected to be fired daily. This will expose the false Israeli claims. The coming days will prove it. I guess we're going to see. In Iran, what does Iran has to say? Well, they're playing it super cool. Super duper cool, because they understand what's going on. They understand that Israel has their number, and they're coming for them, and they're looking for any excuse in order to ramp this up. So right now, you may well see Iran sacrifice one of its limbs, which is the Hezbollah axis, in order to preserve its vital organs and continue to strengthen itself for that fateful day, indeed, when Israel has to brings the war to them. Now, the thing is, though, Israel shut down Al Jazeera. Okay, they shut them down yesterday before the massive airstrikes in the West Bank. So they got wars in the West Bank. They got a war in their own country too, because they constantly need to police the population there. There's extremist views throughout Israel. There is the Gaza Strip. Now they have Lebanon. They got Syria. They got Iraq. Okay, and it's almost like, you know, sometimes you just got to wonder. You know, I used to have friends. They always seem to want to pick a fight with somebody. Everything's going fine, and it's like, we got to pick a fight with somebody. You know, that's just how it is sometimes, and it's not going to end well for anybody. And if you're in Europe, when the flood of refugees comes, just remember, Netanyahu is the one who sent them. Lithuanian military exercises with NATO to practice rapid mass evacuation of the population. I talked about this a few weeks ago. Vitis Dome 2024 began in Lithuania today. It's going to include practicing a procedure for switching government institutions from peacetime to wartime, testing the country's mobilization system. And among other things, the maneuvers will also include practicing issues of mass evacuation of the population, presumably into Lithuania or Latvia or Estonia, or across the Baltic. Local residents have already been warned about the possible changes in the train schedule as a result of this. As part of one of the stages of the exercises, an evacuation center will be created in the Lithuanian city of, I can't pronounce that name, to practice the mass evacuation of the country's residents in the event of a full-scale conflict. Let us recall that in the early September, Lithuanian Ministry of Internal Affairs announced the development of a national plan for the mass evacuation of citizens through the port of Klaipėda. However, the current maneuvers plan to practice the evacuation of not only Lithuanian citizens, but also other residents of other Baltic countries. The planned activities during the exercises for the interaction of government agencies and the Joint Coordinating Committee to support the host country are noteworthy. In this case, and this is important, the host country is Lithuania, ready to deploy NATO allied units on its territory. Thus, one of the main goals of the maneuvers is to prepare the country for the deployment of the alliance troop group. This is all just an exercise to get NATO troops in and to get the civilian population out when the war with Russia begins, because they think it's not going to go nuclear, but it probably is. Get prepared. I am getting some massive orders right now, not from individuals, but from governments, from not even from like groups. So private groups, they're wanting like emergency supplies, massive orders, and we can't even keep up with it. So I would encourage you right now, gear up while you can. Most of you have been watching the channel for a long time. We've been range bound, so I'm pretty sure, you know, the same subs who have heard this all along are going to be the ones that are hearing it again. Gear up wherever you can. If you want to support the channel, CanadianPreparedness.com. I gotta go. We're currently this week installing an off-grid solar system, and it is kick-ass, but it's a lot of work, and I hope to share that experience with you in a vlog. Talk to you soon.